Now, there are more than 21 commercial banks in Nigeria, and 15 of these banks are listed on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Of course, some of them with existing commercial papers and bonds tradable currently on the NSE, as well as the FMDQ OTC Securities Exchange. But wait, the head of investment and Quadros Capital, Bola Hoaino, is here to analyze what the CBN real sector support facility will change in the financial markets going forward. Always a pleasure to have you on Capital Market. Good evening.
Thanks, Temple. Great to be here today.
So I know you know these things. Yes, analysts are just digesting it. Investment bankers are just getting to understand it. But what's your initial impression of this program of the CBN?
Well, thanks, Temple. I think it's welcoming. So it's a follow-up to the discussion at the last MPC meeting, and really to make loans available to the real sector that are going to probably bring about employment, like they said, and of course, also going to reflect in economic growth. Yeah. So I think it's welcoming in terms of how it affects the banks. So they said the CRR portion of the banks have been contributing, so they can give loan at 9%. So ordinarily, CRR is carried has been reserved with the CBN. So part of deposit funds that are reserved by the CBN that is not meant to be touched by the bank. So those funds are sterilized, and the banks ordinarily do not earn any money on that portion. So now it's ability for them to earn at least a certain interest on that portion, maximum of 9% all in. So in terms of interest income, I think it might boost interest income for the banks as well.
Really? At single digits?
Yeah, so like I said, it's...
Because again, they're currently disbursing loans, if at all they are disbursing, actually, at over 20%, 23, 24% in the sector, you know.
Yeah, so the CRR rate at the moment is 22.5%. So those funds are sterilized with the CBN, and they don't lend those funds to any borrower. So what CBN is saying, out of those funds that have been sterilized, you can take part of it and lend to the real sector. So ordinarily, you find that banks have not been growing their loan books. Yeah. They have been advanced to growing loan books. So ordinarily, when the CBN wants to encourage growth, what they do is that they reduce CRR. CRR is a money supply tool. But they find that banks are not growing their books. So this is just to encourage them to grow their books, and also going to have an attendant effect of growth in the economy. So I think it's going to boost income, because ordinarily you won't have any interest on that portion because it's been sterilized with the CBN.
So what you're saying in essence is that by the end of, say, Q4 of this year, or basically H2 2018, the earnings of a lot of these banks, especially the ones that are listed now on the stock exchange, will improve?
Yeah, it's going to have an impact, yeah.
Okay, so we know that heretofore some of these banks also have some lending facilities, some kind of programs to for agriculture, for manufacturing. What will this now change? Do you think it will be able to help them to lend more to towards their agri finance schemes and the manufacturing schemes that they have?
Definitely. So, like I said, opportunity for them to earn additional income. So I expect every bank that's been contributing CRR to jump at it. Yeah. Of course, there are certain guidelines that needs to be put in place. But ultimately, what the CBN is trying to do, they want to spur economic growth. And really, the real sector has been pretty much challenged. So we expect GDP figures to come out on Monday. Q1 GDP was 1.95%. So we expect Q2 to be a bit better. But really, that's not the whole story. So if you look at Nigerians' GDP, it's always important to look at it holistically. So if you look at GDP per capita, it's pretty much very little when compared to smaller economies. So let me give you an example. So look at two individuals. One is earning 1 million, another person earning 200,000. Someone is earning 1 million probably has to feed 50 people. Someone is earning 200,000 just has to feed himself. So if you look at it, the person that has 1 million at the end of the day might not have a lot left at the end of the day because he has to feed 50 people. But someone just 200,000 just himself. So that person might have a better standard of living because he's just fending for himself. So Nigeria, we are the biggest economy in Africa, but when you look at it, GDP per capita, so GDP against our population, it is quite insignificant. And so really, this is meant to spur growth. So in the long run, I think it might. So Nigeria is coming from an average GDP growth of 5% pre-oil crisis. We are barely doing 2% now. Population growth is 3%. So a lot needs to be done in terms of spurring growth. And really, ultimately, that's the objective of this CBN program.
But what do we know about regulations, about laws guiding this sort of things? Because it looks like the CBN is now beginning to take or to play the role of the commercial banks for the economy in a way.
Well, but what they've said is that they're going to be a lender of last resort. So ultimately, they might not play actively in this market. But So basically, I think they're just pouring growth, not necessarily taking the role of the CBN. CBN also has the mandate to also control economic growth as well, money supply and all that. So I think it's within their mandate, it's within their right as well.
Okay, so we also understand that some of these banks currently have commercial papers already, tradable on FMDQ, OTC, and we have quite a number of them also, Fidelity Bank, FCMB, they all have corporate bonds.
Absolutely, yeah.
Currently on the FMDQ and of course on the NSE.
Yeah.
What does this change in their papers?
Well, so this is for the real sector, for the manufacturers and the agri sector. So basically, it's not the banks that are going to be borrowing, but of course, the banks are the ones that are lending. So like you said, a lot of all these banks, they've issued CPs, they've issued bonds as well.
Yeah.
But they are the borrowers. So now we are flipping the coin. So now they are the one lending to the real sector. Like they said, AAA companies are the ones that can, or A-rated companies are the ones that can access this loan. Of course, not so many companies might fall into this bracket, but any company that is A-rated, investment grade, can access the loan. And I think it's pretty much going to be positive for the companies. So, for instance, some of the companies have issued CP in the last couple of months. They've issued at an average yield of about 14%. So now the CBN is saying that it can come and issue a long-term paper, 7 years at 9%. So I think that's fantastic. Or now if you're going to go into the debt markets, you're going to probably issue at a premium at what FGN bonds are. So at the moment, FGN bonds are averaging about 14.5%. So that's about 16 or something percent if you're going to access the debt market. But now, if you're an A-rated company, if you're into the agricultural sector or manufacturing, you can access those loans as single digits.
So it's not all, or basically, let's go by the guidelines again. Now we understand that it is it's not for refinancing of loans, it's not for FX trading, it's also not for banks that are not contributing to CRR and all this. Help us to understand this more then.
So very, very important. So really, if you look at any economy, so the real sector contributes majorly for the employment of that economy of that country. So Nigeria, in terms of employment rates, has about 18.8%. It's pretty much high. And if the story even gets a bit worrisome, if you look at the youth unemployment, which is about 33%. So really, one is to be able to bring down that unemployment rate in the country. Those sector, agri sector, employs one of the largest in terms of labor force, contributes one of the largest. So if you are helping those sectors, you expect that there's going to be better employment in the agri sector and the manufacturing sector. And also it's going to help the country's import substitution plan as well. So ordinarily, the manufacturing and agri sector, things that would have been imported will now be locally manufactured here. And of course, the country can also earn foreign exchange.
But do you think the CBN has what it takes to really, have full checks on all of these banks as against infractions now?
Yeah, absolutely, I believe so. So the CBN over the time has really regulated the banks very well. So in terms of checking the banks, I don't think that will be a problem. So what we expect to see is transparency, better clarity. So spoken with a lot of people, and there's still somewhat a lot of people are not too clear. So there should be clarity, there should be transparency in terms of how the loans will be disbursed, who is eligible and all that. But in terms of monitoring, I think CBN can monitor properly.
Because they are, of course, they have the oversight function.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Of course, you're still standing by. We're not letting you go. Let's go on this short break, but we're back in a minute to preview the week ahead.